is Congressman Brad Sherman. Welcome to our San Fernando Valley telephone town hall meeting. We held about 9 or 10 of these last year. This is our second for 2021. We'll do many this year, and I'm hoping very much that in the second half of the year, we'll do them at Reseda High School's auditorium rather than by phone. But right now, we've got about an hour and 10 minutes to talk about all the issues facing our government. First, I want to give you a phone number to write down just in case we're disconnected for any reason. The number is 877-229-8493. And then you enter PIN number, please write this down, 13402. That's 877-229-8493, PIN 13402. Now, this telephone town hall operates kind of like a large conference call. We'll have thousands of people on the line. If you want to get in the queue to make a statement or ask a question or just talk privately to my staff, dial *3. And if you do have just a private thing to discuss with my staff, you can do that. Or if you just want us to register your views silently, we can do that. But most people who dial *3 will want to be in the queue to ask a live question, be heard by San Fernando Valley residents, and hear my response. Now, we're not going to get to all the questions today, so at the end of this telephone town hall, there'll be a recording machine, and you can leave your comment or question then. I won't listen to it tonight because by the time this is over, it'll be closing in on midnight here on the East Coast, but I will listen tomorrow and get back to you Friday, Monday. So even if we don't have time for your question, I will hear it in the next couple of days. I want to point out that we have on the line Scott Abrams, who's my district director of our constituent service office, located in Sherman Oaks, America's best named city, and Carolina Kraywak, my legal counsel, and they're available every business day at 818-501-9200. If you're having any problem with a federal agency or any of the COVID relief programs that I mentioned here today, if you're having a problem, call Scott Abrams, call Carolina Kraywak, 818-501-9200. They'll work very hard. They'll solve your problem, and then I, Brad Sherman, take the credit. It's an outstanding system. Now, we have two guest speakers that you'll hear from a little later. Back by popular demand is Dr. Lynn Goldman, who has been with us, I think this is her 8th time, and she has outstanding qualifications that I'll describe in a bit, but I'll tell you now that she's both a pediatrician and an epidemiologist. We also have Assemblyman Gabriel, who represents most of us up in Sacramento. Now, I'll cover a few points here at the outset. First, on the economic relief side, we passed the American Rescue Act. It builds on bills we passed last year to help small business with the PPP loan program and with grants to certain small businesses. With the PPP program, it's a matter of the small business both getting the loan and then showing that it meets the standards to have the loan forgiven so that they don't have to pay it back. We can be helpful with either step in that process. And we put a lot of constituent service work into helping small business because you don't just help the owner, you help the customers, and most importantly, you help the employees. That's why the PPP program stands for the Paycheck Protection Program. A second area that's helpful is extended and enhanced unemployment benefits. It's an extra $300 a week on top of your regular benefit. That extra $300 will continue through Labor Day, and that's especially important to gig workers who aren't usually eligible for any unemployment benefits. So you get the $300 federal on top then of zero in the traditional program. The unemployment insurance benefits are administered by the state, and that's why we've got Jesse Gabriel on the line to help us with state government issues. Then we have have the stimulus payments, the $1,400. That's on top of the $600 that we voted for in December, bringing the winter total up to $2,000. This is slightly different in that if you make over $80,000 as an individual or $160,000 as a couple, you don't get a stimulus check. So one question that arises is, do we apply that $80,000, $160,000 limit to your 2019 income or your 2020 income? The answer is whatever they have on file. So if your 2020 income is lower, you'll want to file as soon as you possibly can, and that then the stimulus calculation will be based on that lower 2020 income. If for some reason your 2019 income was lower, and you made actually more money during the COVID year, you may want to wait to file your tax return until you get your stimulus payment. And of course, you can get an automatic extension to wait till October, but that's every year. But you can, without even filing a request, you do not have to file your federal or state income tax returns until May 17th. I'm an old CPA, so I get tied up in all these details. I do want to caution you that your estimated tax payment, especially if you're a gig worker or an independent contractor, is still due on April 15th, as per usual. There are two other stimulus type or economic help programs for individuals. One is one that Jesse will describe, and that is California has its own stimulus check program for Californians of very modest means. And then second, we have in this American Rescue Plan a increase in the child tax credit, and we make it refundable. So that's $3,600 for children age 6 and under, and up until age 17, it's $3,000 a year. This is a fully refundable credit, so even if you're a low income, you're not paying income tax, you're still getting this money back to you. This will lift over 40% of the children who are in poverty above the poverty line, and as I said, it can be in the form of periodic payments, and those are between July and December of 2021. We also have renter's assistance. This is important. Whether you're a small landlord whose tenant can't afford to pay, or whether you're a tenant, the bill provides $278 million to LA County and LA City. In the San Fernando Valley, you'll mostly focus on LA City, and you'd want to contact, if you're a tenant who cannot afford to pay rent, the LA Housing and Community Investment Department. Their website is hcidla2.lacity.org. Getting away from the economics into the other issues that face us, highest on everybody's mind is, how do we get a vaccine? We were already into phase 1, both 1A and 1B. You're entitled to sign up to get the vaccine if you're a healthcare worker, if you're staff or resident of a long-term facility, if you're 65 or older, you're involved in education or child care, emergency services, food and agriculture, you have a serious health condition or disability, or you're involved in the transportation and logistics. Now the news that was just announced today. Beginning April 1st, if you're 50 or older, you can sign up for an appointment as early as April 1st. And beginning on April 15th, everyone in the state is eligible. If you're 16 or older, the vaccines that have been developed have not been approved for those under the age of 16. So it's not a matter of supply. It's a matter that, at that point, it's a matter that they have not been tested on children 15 and younger. There are major vaccine distribution sites, Cal State Northridge and Pierce College, but of course this is also available at Rite Aid, CVS, Walgreens, Ralph's. You want to sign up by going to myturn.ca.gov. In light of the terrible events that have happened in Georgia and Colorado, I should point out that I've joined with Judy Chu in sponsoring 2 bills to deal with hate crimes against the Asian American API community, and those include the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act and the Hate Crimes Commission Act of 2021. And of course, we have to remember that while COVID may have originated in one place, and I significantly blame the Chinese Communist Party for the way they handled it. That is not something that we've got to be careful how we phrase that so that those who aren't listening all that carefully don't ascribe blame to any particular ethnic group in the United States any more than you ascribe this disease to those who are from Brazil, South Africa, or the United Kingdom, where various variants have arisen. We passed in the House two bills that I've co-sponsored dealing with gun control, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021, to say that everybody needs a background check before they get a gun, and that closes the gun show loophole. And then the second bill is the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2021, closing the Charleston loophole, which deals with the circumstance where, for some reason, the FBI can't get back to the gun seller within 3 days. There can be some additional time, a limited amount of additional time, running no more than 10 days for the FBI to complete its check. So there's a quick summary of the issues we're facing in Washington. I'm sure we'll address far more during the rest of this town hall. I will be answering not only some questions, as will our guests, that are presented from those of you who are on the line, but we had a number of questions presented to us by those who RSVP'd. And we're going to have another telephone town hall probably on May 25th, exactly 2 months from today. You can get the details for that, RSVP, and submit a question by going to bradsherman.house. That's for House of Representatives.gov. So this town hall is a part of a series. We'll deal with both oral questions and some that were submitted online by those who RSVP'd. With that, I'll remind you that if you do want to ask an oral question or just talk privately to my staff, you dial *3. And if you're called upon to present your question, I hope you'll tell us your name and the town that you live in. So at this point, I want to recognize Dr. Lynn Goldman, who's a member of the National Academy of Medicine, was recently quoted in CBS News Nationwide. She's on the governing board of the National Academy of Sciences, an advisor to the CDC and FDA, and as I said, both a pediatrician and an epidemiologist. Doctor, what can you tell us?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me to join you once again for one of these town hall meetings. I so much enjoy the questions that come from the public at these meetings. Where to begin? I want to begin with the point that you made, Congressman, about the Asian Americans and what's been going on with how they have felt, and I think that the vast amount of pain that they've suffered that has really come to the forefront because of the shooting that happened in Atlanta. We have seen it on our college campuses that the Asian American students have felt singled out and have felt that people have blamed them somehow for the pandemic. And I do think a lot of misinformation has been put forth that needs to be corrected. There is no evidence at all that the coronavirus epidemic in this country has anything to do with the presence of Asian American people in our population, and that so much of what has transpired has not only been unfair, but I think until Atlanta was invisible to many of us, we just didn't realize how painful this had been for so many of them. So in terms of the coronavirus picture, though, overall, things are brightening. In California in particular, the case transmission rates are down, including in Los Angeles. California is getting caught up now with vaccinating people, and as you said, they've just announced that they're going to be moving eventually sometime in April to vaccinate all adults. And the Biden administration feels that most adults, and by that it's something like 90-95% people over the age of 16, should be possible to immunize them by sometime in July, mid to late July, which would really be a game changer for us societally. In the District of Columbia where I work, we're already seeing some consequences of the immunizations. The District of Columbia has had quarantines that were imposed around travel, people traveling into D.C. from areas that have higher rates of coronavirus transmission. Now, and it's really just as of last week, if you are immunized, meaning you've had all of your vaccines at least 2 weeks ago, the second one was received, you will no longer have to quarantine after traveling into D.C. from another state. But also, and I think this has been really significant, especially for people who work, that if you are fully immunized in D.C. now, they are not requiring you to quarantine even if you have been a close contact with somebody who has tested positive for the coronavirus. And so this, in addition to the new CDC guidelines that are advising us that now if our family members have been immunized, or if it's just with one other family where most people are immunized, that we have the ability to begin to get together in small groups, perhaps even get together without wearing masks. That is very profoundly encouraging. We all want to do that. I personally want to get together with my 90-year-old father. We have been so lonely for being able to have that kind of contact with the people that we're close to. We also had an announcement today that one of the university's rectors has now decided to require that every single student be immunized for COVID before returning to campus. And frankly, we're considering the same kind of action at the George Washington University. We haven't yet decided if we're going to require the vaccine or just try to keep track of everybody that has received it. And perhaps the vaccine could end up helping us make decisions about what kinds of activities are allowable. And this, as you might imagine, Congressman, is extremely controversial in terms of not only the ethics around having some kind of a vaccine passport, but it's also true that given that this vaccine still is being delivered, all of the vaccines for coronavirus in the United States under emergency use authorizations and not actual full approvals, that many of us are pausing to take a very thoughtful approach about whether to require it or instead to give people an opt-out, but nonetheless base what kind of work they can do or what kind of social gatherings they can attend on whether or not they've had the vaccine. So as I said, this is quite controversial, but I think it's also quite encouraging because I think we're beginning to see the ability to have a life that's a little bit more normal. I will tell you, in healthcare it's important because the people who are vaccinated often might come in contact with people who have the virus because they're taking care of people who are sick, logically. And in the past, if we had to potentially quarantine the healthcare workers for 2 weeks after having that kind of exposure, it made it very difficult to staff our clinics, our hospitals, our emergency rooms, and it helps a lot with staffing. And the last piece of encouraging news, and then I'm going to toss the ball back to you, Congressman, is that the very first group of people who received the vaccine, of course, were healthcare workers. And this week we see a study, it's really a long letter in the New England Journal of Medicine, but it shows very clearly that those healthcare workers who are immunized have far lower rates of the COVID-19 infection, almost no infections, compared to the healthcare workers who said, no, thank you, I'd rather wait. I want to see how this goes before I accept the vaccine. And so I think we're beginning to see signs that this is actually working. And I believe that we're soon going to see not only lowering of the transmission rates, but also a great lowering of the rates of people who are hospitalized and dying in relationship to how many people have the disease, because the vaccines are particularly effective in preventing severe illness as well as death. So something to hope for in terms of a return to normal, maybe sometime in mid to late summer, and I'm thinking almost certainly by fall.
I hope we can do even better. We're all hopeful. And Doctor, your comments raise a couple of questions I'd like to address to you, but first I want to hear a couple of questions from our audience. Don, who do we have on the line?
Congressman, we have Matthew from Reseda about stimulus checks. Matthew, you should be on now.
Yes, I'm there. Hello, Congressman. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well.
Okay. I just had a quick question. I did want to know why the original stimulus checks went from $600 originally to $1,400 now, and on top of it, I was reading just a little while ago that 350 billion went to state and local governments instead of to the taxpayers, and I would like to know why that was as well.
Okay. First, as to the stimulus, a lot of us wanted a $2,000 stimulus payment to be built into the December bill. In fact, Donald Trump wanted that, as well as the vast majority of Democrats here in the House. McConnell was in full control of the Senate back then. He did not want payments that large. And so we negotiated and we got the $600 out, knowing that that was $1,400 less than we wanted. Then, when Democrats took control of the Senate, we were able to get the other $1,400 that we were unable to get before. As to the $350 billion, cities, school districts, and states around this country have seen a decline in revenues and an increase in expenses. And as a result, we thought it was important to backfill their lost revenue, to pay some of their expenses, and to prevent them from having to lay people off in the middle of what is still a recession. And so that's why we included substantial aid for state and local government. I'll point out, and this is just, I like to point out ironies now and then. It's thought that Democrats, and there are a couple that fit in this category, want to, quote, defund the police, and Republicans don't want to defund the police. Yet, as a practical matter, the number one thing cities, including Los Angeles, spend their money on is public safety. If you don't backfill their revenue, they have to cut police. And in fact, there were proposals to cut police at the LA City level, and this money that is going to LA City means that there's not a fiscal need for that to happen. Now, how the city council decides to spend money on public safety and whether they want to adjust things or have certain functions performed by people who aren't in uniforms, et cetera, that is a city decision, and that is a decision that should be made city by city. But there is enough money now for cities around the country to fund the police, and had this bill not passed, there wouldn't have been. So it's an odd reversal of roles. If you watch MSNBC and Fox all the time, you think it's the Democrats want to defund the police and the Republicans don't. And in fact, when you look at how people voted on the bill that provides the money that will be funding public safety, you see just the opposite occurrence. With that, let's go to another question.
Okay, Congressman, we have Louise from Canoga Park with a question about obtaining vaccines. Louise, you should be live.
Good evening, Congressman. I saw the notice from my city councilman that there would be vaccines at Pierce College, and when I tried to make an appointment from my iPad, I was told that I had to have a cell phone so that they could send me a notification number, and then they would go ahead and verify it through my cell phone. I do not have a working cell phone because I lost my charger. So how do I get an appointment?
The answer is that is a detail I do not have the answer to. We can work with you on that. I know this is being administered at the state and local level. Either Jesse Gabriel's staff or mine should get you an answer, but you're not the only person without a cell phone.
I know. That's why I decided to go ahead and ask the question.
And I don't know. I mean, I assume you're on myturn.ca.gov.
Well, I will definitely. I wrote it down. I will definitely go to it.
Check to see if that web page doesn't have a way for you to navigate it, even if you don't have a cell phone. And
okay.
if that isn't the answer, then call 818-501-9200, and we'll get you an answer.
Okay, thank you very much, and happy Passover for tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And the next day, yes. Let's see. At this point, I'm going to do one of our survey questions. And this is a survey question we asked last time, so it'll be interesting to see how the results come in this time. You can respond to the survey question just by pushing the buttons on your phone. And the question is, do you approve or disapprove of the Biden administration's handling of the pandemic so far? If you approve, press 1. If you disapprove, press 2. And if you're unsure, press 3 regarding the Biden administration's handling of the pandemic so far. I do want to take just a second to comment on Dr. Goldman's comments. And because I've been involved in foreign policy for a long time, I did chair the Asia subcommittee. I've often criticized the Chinese Communist Party and the government in Beijing. And that, in the decades to come, I'm not going to be the only one doing that. I haven't been the only one doing that. And we have to be very clear that while we criticize the government in Beijing, and we may even at times regard that government as a rival or an opponent of the United States, that is every reason to embrace our allies in Asia, whether it be Taiwan or whether it be our concern for Hong Kong or the Uyghurs or the others who are oppressed by the Chinese government, or whether it be the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community here in the United States. We have to be. We do have to criticize the government in China, and at the same time remember that the greatest victims of that government have been the Chinese people themselves. Their human rights today, and of course millions were killed in prior decades by the Chinese Communist Party. And the second thing is the doctor commented on vaccine reluctance. What's again ironic is that the two groups who seem to be most vaccine reluctant are Trump voters and minorities. And usually you don't put those two groups in the same category, and I think there'll be different programs to win over both. But by a month and a half from now, instead of us having arms chasing the vaccines, it will be vaccine chasing arms, trying to get that last 20% of America immunized, and that is so important for us to do.